All right, guys, we are back with another episode of the Personal Collection. This week, we're going to have on Todd, who has an incredible Jack Johnson collection. And if you guys don't know Jack Johnson, he's the guy that I collect as well. I actually just picked up this 5 rookie card from him. Really, really interesting story of a boxer. A lot of people consider him the Mickey Mantle of boxing. Now, before we jump onto this episode, we are also doing group SGC subs. We're going to be sending out another order in about a week and a half. So if you have any cards you would like to get graded in a black tux, feel free to hit me up on social media or also email. And the link is down below in the description to go to our website. With that being said, here is Todd. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you for joining. And we got Orlando here every single week. Really, really incredible collection. He also collects a lot of pre-war.
Awesome.
Full Goodwin champ set. So he's familiar with all the boxers on that side of things.
Nice. It's one of my favorite sets.
Oh, you got to check out the PC video that he was on here. He has, I think, the highest graded between PSA and SGC.
Awesome.
So lots of like 5s, 6s, and 7s and stuff like that. Those boxers, especially the John L. Sullivan, one of the classic cards back then.
Yeah, that's a tough one to get in a high grade.
Absolutely. So let's kind of go over your journey, how you got into Jack Johnson cards. It's not like something you can go into cards and open up a modern pack and say, I'm going to start collecting Jack Johnson. Everyone kind of has like their journey of discovering boxing cards or like multi-sports in general. I know we talked a little bit earlier before we started live, but kind of tell me how you got into that.
So I began collecting in 1986 and stopped around 1996 because I was younger, collecting most of the things I liked. When I got back into it in 2001, because of the internet and stuff like that, pretty much, and the overabundance of cards in that era, everything had price value went way down. I was kind of a little disillusioned. Sold off most of my sets from 2001 to 2005. And then in 2005, I was just fumbling through eBay one day and I came across billiards cards, old billiards cards from like T218 set, T227, Ogdens and things like that. And I love playing billiards and did it for years. So I started buying them up. And then I started buying some of the sets and collections and stuff like that from other people. And that's what led me into boxing. I was looking at some of the ones, and at the time I didn't have the money and stuff like that. So I was getting some of the cheaper cards, the T218s. And at the time, like Jack Johnson was like $30 a card. It's insane now looking at it, the difference in values.
It's like $200-$300 even for like a 1 or a 2 now.
Yeah. So I started collecting billiards because it's a hobby of mine and things like that. And then I got into boxing. I started collecting Jack Johnson, Joe Louis, and Jack Dempsey from that era. I love rare cards. I like something that no one else has. And it's not like baseball. Even the T206s, you have one of those, there's thousands of them out there. Unless you have a rare back of something like that.
Or one of the big four.
Yeah. So once I got into that, started getting into the boxing, Jack Johnson, I started building up my collection. I'm not a big I'm not a big dollar collector. I don't have like those $1 million cards or anything like that. I started out with $500 and just kept flipping my collection until I have the sets that I have now. And 5 years ago, I put my down payment on my house from selling some of my cards.
Wow.
So
was that boxing cards or is that other cards?
It was predominantly boxing cards. I'm like putting myself out of that. It was predominantly boxing cards. I took it to Heritage in 2016. And it was funny because they didn't know anything about boxing cards, even though they had sold probably the one premier boxing card of the time years before for $20,000.
The Red Sun, Jack Johnson, right?
Yes. And so besides that, like he had nothing to go by. He comes, I go over his house with my collection, and he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, it's like $5,000 worth of cards." And I was like, "Yeah, I might just take it home then." Like, ended up selling half of my collection and got $55,000 for it. It blew his mind. Like they didn't even think anything of it.
What was in your collection at that time? Because boxing cards definitely spiked the last 3 or 4 years. I can't imagine 2016 prices.
I wish I had some of those cards back. I had a T218 Jack Johnson that was a PSA 8. That went for $5,000 at the time. Right now, I wouldn't. It was a blue, the blue front version. Now that would go for a ton more. I also had a PSA 5 E775 that went for $2,000. I've since had that card probably 5 times, five different versions of it, and it's gone up considerably in value since then. So it was a lot of cards like that. And then I had also years before bought, it was a big lot from, Huggins and Company.
Huggins and Scott?
Yeah, Huggins and Scott's auction house. I bought a box that had like 24 sets in it. And Heritage had some of them graded, and they graded like almost the highest that those sets have ever graded. So those sets did very well as well.
I'm guessing they just pieced them off one by one instead of like a full set build.
No, they did them by set, but some of them got pretty good value. I had the 1947.
Is it the red one with
yes.
Yes. Yeah, so that's interesting because I've seen a lot of people say it's either 47 or a 49 release, and I believe PSA and SGC have 2 different datings on them as well.
Yeah, so a lot of them. The problem is a lot of them did multiple years to release the sets, so they're a lot of times they're just guessing. Like, so if it's 47 or 49, I mean, it depends. Like the Sugar Ray Robinson, that would make a big difference.
Yeah.
Some of the other cards, not so much. But yeah, they graded that, and I had about 5 10s come out of it. And that set had never had a 10 before.
That's incredible.
That set went for somewhere like $5,000 or $6,000. And at the time, that was insane for a boxing set.
Boxing in general, because I mean, there's a few cards that are 5-figure cards. I mean, Jack Johnson wise, I think there is a die cut, which it's escaping me right now. Then you have the Red Sun, and then you also have, there's another 2 from 1910. It's God, they're a lot tougher sets.
E78, the E78s are very rare. So if you get one that's like a 3 or 4, you're gonna get close to $10,000 for it. There's the T229 or 224, depending on, it's the same set, but one's Copic and one's Pet.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about, the Copic and Pet.
Yeah, Pet's not going to go for as much. There's been 4 or 5 graded. Copic, there's only been 2 graded. So that's much tougher. That one just went recently for $12,000.
I didn't know it sold recently.
Yeah. I keep being the bridesmaids in all the auctions. I can't win them. So.
Man, I'm curious who else sold them. I would assume whoever sold it would have multiple cards, not just that Jack Johnson.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's take a look at some of your cards as well. I know some people want to see those.
The one my son's favorite, and one everybody like asks about, is the T227. It just has, sorry, I know there's glare, but it just has great color. And that's an SGC 4.5. That has the honest long cut back. Now, that's the highest honest long cut back. I know there's a raw one that is in much better condition than that one. But graded wise, that's the highest honest long cut back. Miners Extra, there's 2 5s out there.
Wow, isn't Miners Extra a little bit tougher to find as well?
Yes, yeah, now in the T227s, the Miners Extra, and the honest long cut aren't that far off, but they are harder to get. Yes.
There's those two, and then is there Red Cross in that set as well, or what's? I think there's what, two few others.
Well, there's the T218 has a cross set of T219. Now T218 has the Mecca and Hassan backs. They both also have different factory backs as well, but there's also the Tolstoy backs, and they also have a Canadian version of C52. Then the T219 has three different backs. They have the Honest Long Cut. Honest Long Cut also has like a green back and a black print back. They have the Miners Extra, which is a little bit more rare. It rivals the Tolstoy backs of the T218. And then there's the Red Cross, which is extremely hard to find. There's only been, I think, one or two Jack Johnsons that have been graded. Two that have been graded. One recently, and just waiting for that one to come to auction. But I've been trying to get that one for years. That one eludes me all the time. But I do have the. Let me see here.
Man, that's incredible, though. I mean, Red Cross, if you guys follow baseball cards, those are extremely tough to find. They look like T206 cards, and they have a Red Cross back on those. It's pretty much the same boxing. Now, I wanted to ask also, with the different factories that are there on the backs, is there a value added for specific factories? Like in baseball cards, like Factory 42 is a little bit tougher. I think it was T205, and those go for a little bit more. But is there any special factories that there's like a lot less of them out there?
So the problem with it is like the boxing, it's building up. So the bigger the more collectors out there, the more that there'll be a difference in it. Right now, there really isn't that much of a difference. The bigger collectors will pay more for a Factory 30 back than a Factory 649. Factory 649 is much more common of a back. I don't know if there's that many collectors that collect the different backs. I know there's at least 3 or 4 of us that'll collect all different ones. And I don't know if a lot of the newer collectors know the difference between that there was different backs and such. But yeah, there's let me see if I can. Yeah, so.
I was gonna say, do they label them on some of the slabs yet?
No,
I don't think
that's the other thing. That it's hard. That's small print, so you're not really gonna see it. But at the bottom of the center of the card, it'll have the factory, and the factory, most of them have 649s. Very hard to find some with the factory 30s.
Got it. That's really good information. And I'm gonna go through a few comments real quick before you see some more cards. So. Random77, what's up, Legends? Jack Johnson is the GOAT. Vintage cards are still undervalued. I mean, compared to some of the baseball card prices for these legends and historical figures. I have a few boxing cards. Germany from 1930s, cool stuff. Agreed. Hello from Japan. Hey, man, I appreciate you being on the stream. 1954 ABC cards. 52 Swedish record. We got Yan in here as well, Midwood Vintage. Ian will be on eventually too. I told him he gets to jump on an episode. Jack Johnson,
awesome. He helps me out all the time.
And Cinderella Man is what I'm looking to buy now. 1935 for Cinderella Man. If you want some of his rookie cards, great info. And then grading companies don't quite know the differences yet. Yeah, that's a problem. The education side on like super niche cards, like even boxing or non-sports or like fringe sports, it's just not there right now. I mean, it sucks. A lot of sets still get rejected, and you have to supply a ton of information. Even then, you get rejected.
The other problem with that is now, because of the volume of cards getting graded, you don't have. When SGC was in New Jersey, I used to be able to go over there and like sit down with them and say, hey, and go over the different cards. You're not going to be able to get that nowadays because they're grading 5,000 cards a day. So when they were probably grading maybe 500 cards back then a day, if that, and they had the chance to be able to come out and sit down with you. Now you don't have that. Even PSA's never really been able to do that because of the volume they do. And BGS has never, ever been one of those. But like SGC has always been the company that you can go to and talk to. You can do it through email now, but it's a little tougher. Like it's not as easy to be able to walk through some of these because for years I come across cards that are one-off, like, and it's hard to explain to them what they are. But they do a decent job at getting as many of them graded.
I agree with that. I mean, finally got the 2002 Coachella set for some music cards that they said they're going to grade, but we're still talking about the 1992 Jankies, which I just sent them over a pack, but they said it'll take a little bit to research it.
Yeah. Yeah, the best thing is to do all the research yourself and send it over. But even then, sometimes if they can't see it themselves online, they still won't grade it.
But that's also the research side of things too, and we can have a whole discussion on it. That's the fun part about like boxing cards or miscellaneous sports or like non-sports, because this information isn't out there. You got to talk a lot of collector to collector and really dive deep into it.
I'll jump into one that goes on the same kind of subject. I'm going to try to get this graded by them, but this is a 1923 Boxeo Jiu-Jitsu from Spain. But the back is a Sable Bernadas. Now, what's been graded in the back is Evaristo Juncosa, which is 1931. Similar to this one is the Falco and Fair backs. They've been graded. But in diving into this, I found out, like, I didn't know much about Spanish cards. A month ago, I got a chance to buy this thanks to Brad, who I don't know if he's watching, but Brad helped me acquire this card. And that night I was like jumping into trying to see, and I came across, it took me like 2 weeks. I came across 24 different backs. So they're stamped on. The card itself, it was made by a manufacturer, but then all the different backs, like this is a chocolate company, but there's been just bizarre backs, dentists, attorneys' offices.
Really?
Just all kind. Most of it was like chocolate candy backing because they're trying to, I guess, towards kids. But then there was like a fair one where or a raffle. I don't know what it was, like a raffle. If you traded in so many, you got this. And it was crazy. Like there's just so many different backs, and the more you dive into it, the more backs there are.
That reminds me a lot of like the M101 set from baseball 1916. There's so many sets, or there's so many backs out there, and even the common back you don't see all the time. It's like anytime I see those at the show, I'm just loading up Google trying to see what's the rarest backs because I can't even memorize them.
And I got a Jack Dempsey one, same. Now this is the same as his Juncosa.
So I always see those labeled on slabs as 1920s in general. They don't give a specific year.
But on the back, I would say this is 1930. Some of them say 1920s. Some of them say 1930s. It looks more of his late 20s, early 30s, where he's dressed in a suit in a movie presentation. I do not think these are early. It's like some people say it's his rookie. It's definitely
no, definitely not. It's the Underwood that's his rookie, and then the strip cards, which we talked about again, 1920 versus 1925.
Yeah.
Which what are the right years on those?
The back on this has S for adult. Now this is where I say, like, this got labeled by SGC, but it got labeled as chocolate finos. So they obviously don't know Spanish. But it was a similar. It's a chocolate's back, but same as the Juncosa, but just different backstamp. And I'm coming across that there's probably like 4 or 5 versions of that I found. So it's crazy. The Spanish cards tend to have stamp backs, so they have many different varieties.
Man, and I do wonder if it's ever going to be documented one day. Like, all right, here's the scarcity in all these bats. Like, at least baseball's had researchers for decades that
Yeah,
are here, like, trying to figure out stuff at card shows or online. Like, boxing just doesn't really have that. I know there's one boxing book or something like that. I haven't read it yet, but just in general.
yeah. David Warshaw has one out. That's really good. I haven't read it yet, but I know Jan has, and he says it's really good, and I believe him. There's a couple of guys that have done a lot of research and have yet to like document everything. They're doing a little of it on the class or boxing classic cards page on Facebook. So we're trying to get as much of her. We're bouncing. All of us are bouncing the cards that we have and the backs that we know and the different variations and stuff that off of each other and coming up with a pretty good list of cards from the late 1800s, early 1900s so far.
I highly recommend that group. If anyone wants to get into vintage boxing, has a Facebook account, definitely join that because I've learned quite a bit in that group. Just seeing cards posted in the discussions in there.
And there's some incredible collectors that put mine to shame in there. They're not as forthright. They don't come out as much to show off their cards. But they have some incredible collections on there.
Definitely. Well, let's see some more of your Jack Johnson cards.
Now they consider this as rookie. These are both. I'm not the best with this. So it's a PSA 6, but it's his Ogdens. I have 2 of them right currently, and that's probably one of his most common cards. So everybody puts a high value on it. It's really tough because there's over 100 of them, probably 150 graded between PSA and SGC. Same with like the T218s. I was doing some numbers earlier, and like the T218s, just with PSA, the front version has 277 graded, and the side version has 436 graded.
Dang,
So,
I didn't realize there's 400 of them plus graded.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more common. The other cards that I have, and some of them don't get the love, like this one here. I just recently got this one. I had this in a set before, but this
I know there's 3 different sets that have that.
So there's only been for the Teofanis, there's only 12 of those cards graded by PSA. SGC probably has a little bit more. SGC tends to get more boxing because they differentiate the cards better. Whereas PSA just labels them. If it's like the T218s, it's T218s. It doesn't differentiate Hassan, Mecca, or Tolstoy. T219s, the same thing. They don't differentiate Honest Long Cut, Miners, or Red Cross. So it's hard to know exactly how many are out there. But that being said, you can see clearly with SGC the difference of scarcity. So, and then there's all like they differentiate the Tolstoys for the T218s as well, which don't come up too often. But in PSA, it would just be a T218.
That seems like such a mistake. And that's just like labeling every T206 card the same. And it just is not. It's not the case on those.
And I'm more of a, I guess, purist. I like this. I would rather collect all of the same back. That's why it's hard for me to get into T206s. I like the Hall of Famers, but like if I was to collect the entire set, I would think there's like 20 different sets. Like I don't want to have a mixture of backs and call that a set.
Well, you know what some people do is they chase the rainbow of I should say rainbow because of how people collect today. But there's a guy on Twitter going after the Vic Willis rainbow with all the different rare backs.
That's how I'm doing it with like the Jack Johnsons, because I have like this right here is just all the different backs of the T218s, and I'm still missing like 5 or 6 of them. But that's different backs and different factories and things like that.
Were some of them printed different? Because I noticed the Jack Johnson green, you had some that were flipped. Were they all?
So that's another variation as well. Let me see if I know I have it here. No, I don't.
And then
one of them got printed backwards.
Oh, I was gonna say, random says, imagine a Jack Johnson PSA 10, it would be worth millions. I don't think it would go for millions.
If it depends which card. It wouldn't be his rookie card. His rookie card, there's too many of them. But if you had an E78 or a T226 and a 10, that would pretty much get close.
I think the Red Sun, if there's a 10 out there right now, I mean, especially based off the last auction, was what, 2008 or 2010 or something like that?
Yeah.
When that was a 6 that sold for 20K, or was it a 5?
6.
Okay, so a 6 sold for 20K, and that's, I mean, the 6 now is probably what, 150 probably?
It depends. It's very tough because you got to get the right buyers to put into it. I would say it's at least 50,000, and definitely like probably somewhere between 50,000 and 150. He is going to have an HBO special coming out, and that will skyrocket his cards like crazy. And the only reason I say that because a lot of people will say, "Well, no, Ryan just had one and it just barely edged his cards up." But everybody knows who Nolan Ryan is.
Yeah.
So when you put someone like Jack Johnson, who the average person in this country doesn't know, and they should, because his story goes further than boxing. But in history class, we're never taught about Jack Johnson, and there's many things that he did for this country and things he went through that shaped, as Muhammad Ali said, if there was no Jack Johnson, there would not be him or Jackie Robinson. Jack Johnson did a lot for civil rights before. Some people consider him doing it the wrong way, but is there really any wrong way? Like, you just have to jump ahead of it and try to do it.
He was chased out of the country. I mean, he fled to Mexico.
He lived very boldly in a time that they didn't want that. So if anybody ever gets a chance, there is a PBS documentary on Jack Johnson. It was very enlightening to me because I didn't know his full story. I knew most of it. I could not. This covered so much more that I did not know. And then I'm sure HBO is going to take that and glorify a lot of the things that he went through, and probably still can't touch what he actually went through in his life.
What would be some examples? Because Orlando says he was put in the jail as well. So, like, just some information so people know.
So he was in prison twice. Once in Texas before he was a really big boxer for boxing. And he would go down there in boxing clubs. They were illegal at the time, but that's how he made his money. They wouldn't let him box against the white guys, so he would go down and box against anybody he could to make money. Then he made it somewhat bigger. In 1903, he should have been given a chance to contend for the title against Jim Jeffries, but no one would let him do that. So then, fast forward, he was living very boldly in boxing and in real life. They imprisoned him for crossing prostitutes over state lines. He was dating a prostitute at the time, and because she was white and he crossed her from Chicago to New York, they got him for there was a law on the books at the time. If you cross the state line with a woman for any other reasons and you're not married with her, they considered it prostitution. So they went after him for that. He fled the country. He eventually came back to do the prison time. But it was just a manufactured case against him because they didn't want him being out there boxing, being the champ. They didn't like black champions because that during that time they thought that the boxing champion of the world was a symbol to the world and it needed to be a white person. So none of them would give him the chance. And even in 1908 and 1910, actually in 1910 when he beat Jim Jeffries, there was riots throughout the country. The worst race riots that this country's ever seen. More deaths, more everything. Because at that time, even though slavery was supposed to be over and all those things, there really wasn't equal rights in this country. And it emboldened both sides to be very vocal. And there's not the video of nowadays. There's not the everything that you can see. So people got a lot more, did a lot more things, emboldened them to be able to do things that they thought they could get away with. So, yeah. So if you ever look into it, it's a great, great documentary. And it shows what he's done outside the ring as well as what he did inside the ring.
That was a really good history lesson. And then we have a comment over here about, I'm going to probably butcher the last name. I actually don't know how to pronounce it, but what is it? Choinsky? I don't know. An illegally sanctioned bout while in prison. And then he fought him the finer points of boxing.
Yes. So, yes, that's who he fought in Texas that they put him in prison. But I think it was more, even though they threw him in prison, it was more a publicity stunt. And they took like his winnings from the thing because they took pictures of him. There's pictures out there of him like shaking the cops' hands and being in bars. So it was illegal at the time to do that bout. But because Troyansky had such a big name, I think they let Jack Johnson get away, like, because they weren't going to arrest Troyansky. So they can't arrest one and not the other for the same.
Yeah. You know, it's funny too. Like people don't realize it was very illegal back then, but also everyone loved boxing at the same time. Talking about like the Donnell Sullivan fight, where the president even wanted to know what the results were, but that was highly illegal.
Yes, it was much bigger back then than it is now.
Yeah, I think they just need its character once again. I mean, the Creed fields obviously help it, but there's no like figure right now besides like Mayweather that people think of for boxing.
Yeah, yeah. Boxing's kind of gone by the wayside because of MMA. So now MMA is starting to pick up. And I think after it really went downhill after Tyson left the scene because he was polarizing in the whole boxing industry. And then it went to people more thought it was staged than anything after that. So it kind of went downhill. It's starting to make a comeback, which is great, but MMA definitely took over and just had done a better job publicizing everything and getting people into it.
But it's also interesting taking a look at like old vintage boxing because like, even the 1800s, it'd be kind of considered MMA today. It's a mixture of like boxing and wrestling.
Yes. Yeah, it's crazy to watch some of the old bouts. I was watching some of the old Jack Johnson bouts, and I never realized how good of a boxer he was. Like he just played with people. He laughed. Like he was laughing in the middle of boxing them. Like
oh, that's amazing.
If you ever have a chance, look at some of his boxing bouts. He literally, like the Tommy Burns one, he's talking to the audience. You can't hear it because they didn't have sound back then. But you can see him talking to the audience, laughing at them, like trying to egg them on to fight him.
Man, that's really cool. Well, let's take a look at some more Jack Johnsons.
I mentioned earlier the E75. That's a PSA 5. There's 5 others graded as a PSA 5 and only one higher as a 7, which is great. I do got this year. It's my second time I've gotten his autograph.
I think I've seen that one before with Jack Johnson. Who had that? I can't remember.
Yeah. I do have his autograph, just regular cut autograph, and I'm gonna eventually have Tanner Jones do
A card?
card. Yeah, I
Oh,
think
that'd
he
be
would be
really
the best
cool.
person to get to do like some kind of a card. I'm still trying to figure out how. I think it's going to be a postcard type size card because of the cut autograph. Um, Still trying to figure out what would look best on that.
He would do a good job. I mean, I'm pretty sure he collects pre-war cards as well.
Yeah, yeah, he does. Um, I do have some sets too with Jack Johnson. I have almost the entire. I'm missing 4 cards right now. It's the C52, which is similar to the T218, but much harder to get. It doesn't have the brand. It doesn't have a maker. It just
And
says
no factory either, right?
no, yeah, no factory, no maker on the back. I have 105 of the cards graded by SGC. I'm just missing 4 right now. And a lot of them are very high grade.
So I actually know a guy who might have those extra 4. Ian, if you're watching this, he's a collector over in the UK. He just picked up a bunch of those. So
Oh,
he may
did
have those final 4.
That's where I got them from. I bought 3 lots of them. At one point in time, I had the whole set, but when I accidentally sold a group of 18 off in raw ones, that would have completed my set.
Oh,
Yeah, and whatever, it happens. They had been sitting there for a while. I was trying to sell off some of my old duplicates. I thought they were 218s, and sold them in a lot to someone, and then realized after probably 6 months later, because I hadn't paid attention to my set, and I was like, let me send all these off to get graded. And it was when the prices started to come back down, and I went, no. But it is what it is.
that's tough. I mean, it's easy to do so with how similar the backs are, though.
Yeah.
The cards in general. Hey, send me those numbers that you need, and I'll forward it to them.
Okay, awesome. I have this was a find this year, and Ian found a similar group this year. I got these from a Jack Johnson collector. His name's Dave, and he hit me up. It's part of the good thing about these Facebook groups and things like that. He knew I was a collector. We've done some transactions in the past, and he was like, "Listen, I have a set of them." He's like, "I've never seen the whole thing. Would you want them?" And I was like, "Sure." So I got the whole set. This is one of the ones. Well, it's not the whole set. So it's.
And just for people paying attention, seeing those cards, those are not Spalding champs. Like, I thought those were Spalding champs at first based off the design, but when you look closer, they're not.
So it's a little more intricate on the front. The back is just plain. I sent them to SGC, so they have the no holder. But the back's plain, and it's a paper stock. So it's a very, very fragile cards. Only one has ever come up for auction, and that was in 2009 through Leland's auction house. So I use that as an example. There are several collectors that have it. There's probably 6 examples that I know of this card. There's 2 that are graded, but they're graded labeled wrong by SGC as Spalding champions. I only know that because one of them showed up at auction, an SCP auction this year. The other one I know is in a collector's collection in Boston. It's an SGC 1.5. I asked the guy about it, and he years ago, I'm trying to look up his information because I had bought a collection of cards off of him way back in the day, and his was the same thing. Like I have a picture of it in my computer downstairs, and it was the same one. And at the time, I had no idea what it was. I just thought it was a Spalding with no back.
That's what I thought it was
now
too.
I know different because they never made a Jack Johnson Spalding that we know of. You never know because Spaldings are I love the Spalding set as well. It's a very scarce set, except for like Dempsey, Hagen, and Ruth. Everybody else has 10 cards or less that have ever been graded. And there's over 200 cards that have come out of it.
And there's some great grails in there. You have the Bobby Jones, that's like a 5-figure card. You have Red Grange, who's a 5-figure card in there.
Yep.
And then a lot of really good stuff.
The Dempsey doesn't get as much because of how many. Dempsey was the 4-figure of everything. He even had more cards than Babe Ruth at the time. So the amount of Dempseys that came out of that Spalding set, whether people just saved them more, but he also has 4 different variations to his back on that set as well. So that's another different thing to collect.
I didn't know he had the 4 variations. I know there's like that one Dempsey on eBay all the time. I can't remember if it's like a 5 or a 7. And I'm always looking at it. It's like $3.99. I'm like,
I know.
No one ever bids on it or buys it. I don't want it at $3.99.
That's actually more of a rare back because it's a promo back that has the promo. There's the blank back, and then there's the blank back's the rarest because it was probably cut from an ad sheet. There's the copyright in 1926 and the copyright 1927 back. I think there's only 4, but yeah, pretty sure that's what they are.
I didn't even know they had 1927. I've always seen them as 26s. So
yeah, they went over the year. So like most sets back then, they just kept producing them. Just like T206 from 09 to 1913. But most places just say 1910. Some of the boxing sets, like the E75s, E79s, and stuff like that, they probably went over years as well. But everybody just calls them the 1910 because it's just easier. It's that era. Here's a rare version. So I have the that's the E79. I have that in a 5, which there's only 5, I think 5 graded higher than that. But I also have this, which is a different back, which is the red back. Now every grading company, right? There's only 5 of those graded with a red back. Every grading company calls them an E79, but they were actually the beginning of the E80 set. So they released the E80 set, but they started it with the E79 set, just duplicating it with a red back. And then you get the, and I have that in here as well. They had 2 Johnsons. They had that, and then they changed the back to include the E79s and then added at the bottom the E80s.
That's really interesting.
So, but the grading companies won't change that over yet because even though you have the collectors that know it, that know that's how it progressed, it still doesn't correlate with why it has only the E79s in red on the back of the first part.
Do you think part of that also, I could be wrong, but how Jefferson Burdick probably wrote it down?
Could be, yeah.
I know like all the grading companies base a lot of their card sets off of the Burdick designation. But
yeah, someone has to come up with a new. He did a great job, especially with his collection was insane. He had almost every card ever produced. But at the time, there just wasn't as much information. So now with the internet and everything, it's a little bit easier to look up, compare with some of the sets, especially some of the more rare sets that happened.
It still amazes me though, like even how long the internet is, there's still sets being discovered all the time that
yes,
no cards have ever been graded, no pictures have even been posted online, and you're just like you see this stuff that not know that was out there.
There's I had one graded recently that had never been graded before, and I was shocked. I think it was a mistake that they graded it because it wasn't cataloged, but it was an Ogden's card.
Really?
And it's a Billiard one. This one I've been searching for years. Sorry about the glare.
You're good.
But it's a Melbourne Inman. It actually was probably produced in 1897, 1898. But they're all going to be listed as 1901 Ogdens. because
Yeah.
that's what PSA and SGC decided to do. It was to commemorate his junior championship in England. One came up in 2009 or 10 and was auctioned on eBay. And I was trying to win it at the time because that's what I was bigger into billiard cards then than I was Jack Johnson. And it boggled my mind because it went for like $750. And back then I was like, why would a billiard card go for $750? Ever since then, I've been looking for this card and never been able to find it. And then on eBay one day, and I even messaged the seller. He's a big dealer in England. And I messaged him and I said, listen, you should separate the cards. I said, you have 2 cards in there that are very rare. He had 9 Ogden's billiard players in one arraignment. And all it said was 9 Ogden's billiards for $25. And I was like, listen, I reached out to him. I said, I'll buy it separately. He goes, no, I'm going to let the auction go through. And I was like, I think that's a mistake because no one knows what these cards are. And I ended up getting it for $25. And I got that, and I got another rare version in here. But this one probably goes raw, which this one won't be graded. I have several of these I tried to get graded, but they're uncatalogued as well. These are a little bit more common. There's probably 24 that I know that exist, whereas there's only two of this one that I've ever seen. I'm sure someone else has 1 or 2 lying around, but it's probably like the holy grail of billiard, one of the holy grail of billiard cards. And I sat there, I was like, oh my God. And it ended up, I ended up selling all 5 of the cards to make my money back and then some.
When I go to Europe in a month or so, when I'm at the show, I'm gonna text you any billiards cards that I see from Ogden. Like, is this the one to get? Is this the one to get? Because I'm sure I'm gonna run into so many Ogdens over there. I'm crossing fingers, right? But like, I'm sure there's gonna be so much over there. I'm really hoping though. Also on the Ogden side of things, I can run into the Houdini. Over in America, it's so expensive. Over there, hopefully it's cheaper.
Well, that's the thing. So I've made a lot of connections with people in England, Switzerland, Italy, Germany. Jack Johnson's over there. Don't go for anything.
Like, really?
He was big, but Joe Louis, Jack Johnson, they go for something, but they don't go for what they go for over here. So I try to like look at it and trade them guys that are going to go for great prices in their country and nothing over here for cards.
Who are some examples so I can stock up before I fly over?
Which I'll have to look into it because I don't see them that often. And I'll be like, yo, do you want this or what can I get you? But I do a lot of business with them, trading back and forth or selling me their cards for what it would sell for over there, and I'll sell them the cards for what they would sell for over here. And I recently got from Germany that I got raw. It's Casanova. It ended up being a 3. When I saw on the picture, it looked like it was damaged. So I was like, ugh, I don't know. But it ended up being a 3, and it looked great. So it's little things like that. And then I got a lot of my Jack Dempsey's. So there was a guy in Switzerland that had, or Sweden that had his, let's see where it is. He had 17 of these.
17?
So he sold me 17 of these back in 2010.
Oh, and, back in 10, I'm like, 17.
Yeah. And then I started selling some of them off before the boom. And then I'm shocked at what they go for now. But this is probably my best example I kept. And then I have another one in PSA. Now there's 2 PSA 4s now, but at the time there wasn't. Oh, there it is.
Now, is that specifically a 1920, or do you think it's dated wrong, or do you think
it should be 1919?
1919.
It was for the fight. So it was for his fight with now I'm forgetting. I'm gonna say the wrong name. Jess Willard. So there's a Jess Willard card and there's a Dempsey card, and it was a promo in a paper or a magazine or whatever it was, and it was for the fight. So it had to have been produced prior to the fight. The fight was in 1919, so it has to be a 1919 card. But everybody labels it as 1920 because Underwood and Underwood, after this, did postcards of Jack Dempsey and George Carpentier's fight, which I think was in 1920. So since they were labeled 1920, they labeled this 1920 and just called it a day.
Oh man.
But until I got those 17, there was only like, I want to say 4 or 5 graded by both SGC and PSA. And then so I sent half to PSA, half to SGC. PSA really, and I'm not going to get into everything, but they really screwed me on the grades of that. I sent over, I think it was like 65 cards, and that was the last time I ever sent anything to PSA. Until recently, because there was one SGC wooden grade that I had to send to PSA just to be able to get the money for it. But PSA labeled a bunch of them 3s with an MK. And it was just because I irritated them at the time, because at that time it was a 2-week lead time for cards. And quick story, they lost my cards. They wouldn't admit to it. 6 months later, I was contacting them. I got livid with them. And then honestly, I completely forgot about the cards because I had been screaming at them for months and months and months. And then about a year later, they showed up at my doorstep. And all of them were graded 2 to 5 grades below where they should have been. And so most of them were for my PC. I didn't care. Billiard cards, I was like, I don't care. I just throw them in my PC. And then I took about 14 of them, gave them to a friend of mine to resubmit. And they all came back higher. One of them was like a 1922 Jack Dempsey, the Comic Life card. They graded it a 1. It came back as a 6. So they said, well, I mean, it depends on the grader. No, nothing comes from a 1 to a 6. And then there were several of them that jumped 2 grades, and that was the last time I ever used PSA.
Damn.
Yeah, so that's why a lot of people know I don't use PSA. I'm an SGC fan. I'm not an SGC fan. I love the fact that back in the day I could sit there with them, talk to them about cards, and they would do the research and grade cards that PSA wouldn't even be bothered to grade. That's what made me like SGC.
I mean, I like the slabs, and they definitely still are trying at least on that side of things. Hopefully we can get. Hopefully, I know we talked a little bit also about that one set. Hopefully we can get them to grade that once we write an article or something like that.
Yeah, there's a couple that I'm trying to get them to grade. Oh, the thing I was talking about SGC, I'm shocked that they grade this. This is an uncatalogued version. So I bought the catalog of the Ogdens, ended up overpaying for a book from I think it's like, I don't know, 1975. But it's probably one of the most in-depth Ogdens catalog. There's over 6,500 Ogdens cards, individual cards. This was not, neither one of these, this wasn't in it, and this wasn't in it. And that's why in times past, no one's ever graded them. But I wasn't going to argue that with SGC because honestly, there's no reason not to grade it. You know what it is. Just because it's not in the catalog doesn't mean it's not a card to be graded. You know it's legit.
When I head over to UK also, I'm going to look for an Ogden's catalog. I really want to get one. I would hope that they have some at the show. I would hope.
They'll have them there. They're kind of common. They're not hard to get. But I ended up getting mine off of eBay. There's probably some on there. I was just looking recently. There's some an English version of a Burdick's catalog. I think it's by Murray, and it has a lot of cataloged cigarettes cards. So I was thinking about getting one of those to see how well they catalog the cards over there.
Be interesting. We got a few more comments too. Have you heard about the story of the fight between Jack Johnson and Jack Dempsey?
No.
All right, you got a Canton card collector. Give us more info. They said there's an unsanctioned fight in Canada between both Jacks.
I thought they never fought. I thought something happened at a bar or something like that with them, but they never actually fought because Jack Johnson or Jack Dempsey wouldn't fight. But I guess we'll find out.
Really good show. Todd is super knowledgeable. Absolutely. We'll definitely go-to resource for boxing cards. Thanks for sharing with that. Don't need to be a fan of respect consistency. Yeah, they've been pretty good. And then a few other comments on that side of things. Do you have any other Jack Johnsons to share with us, or is that pretty much it on that side of things?
I got tons.
let's showcase a few more that are pretty cool that people don't know. And then if you guys have any questions, feel free to put it in the comments over here, and we can do some more Q&A.
So I recently just got this from England. One of my connections is father had passed, and he's selling off his collection to me a little bit at a time, but it's a Kopi 7, which is the highest rated. I've got the Wills in both versions, 6 and a 6.5.
You show the backs on those because they're really cool.
Yeah, these I really like the backs on these, especially the scissors one.
They have some cricket stuff too. It looks so cool.
They're definitely one of my favorite cards. This one is from 1930, so it doesn't get the money that some of them get, but it's one of his more scarce cards. 13 have been graded of this, and it's the Singleton and Cole. This is a 7. It's the highest. There is a PSA 7, but there are none even closer to it after that.
I love the image on that one.
Yeah, it's definitely a great one. Really cool one. Boy's friend.
And those were hand cut too, aren't they?
This has a back just similar to the Ogden's rookie one, which is cool. I really like this card.
The Susini. I love that set.
Yeah, the Susini set is amazing. Just the artwork on it, and to find the back unglued is virtually impossible.
Yan was telling me that those are like hand colored too.
So if you look closely at them, and I never, because he got some of the other ones as well. There are hand touches to them, and it's amazing. You're not going to find one just like the other. I mean, they're close. Yes, they are a picture image, but then they're touched up after that. Here's another one that I think is extremely underrated. It's 1912. I think it's underrated just because how many versions of this. The Teofani in 1925 used it. The 1927 Huddins used it. But this comes with a green back, a black back, a gray back, which is a little bit more scarce. And then there's the without maker, which I think is the most scarce. Right now, the gray back's more scarce than the without maker, but I think now that people are starting to understand what a gray back is, there's going to be more graded that way. The without the maker, there's only 3 graded with this version, and then I also had the Huddins, which that's a super rare set. I have the only known complete set. There's 25 cards in the set. 33 cards totally have been graded.
And what does the back look like on those? Like that.
Yeah.
I like those backs.
Man, I wish that glare wasn't there, but yes, it's a beautiful back on these. I'm not sure, and I'm trying to do a little research. I'm not sure why it's 1927 and why the Teofani Magnums was 1925, because the pictures of it.
1912.
Right? You would think if it was 1925 and 1927, they would have put a Dempsey and someone else in there. But it's the exact same set as the Kellens from 1912. I don't know as much about it. I will never say I have a great collection. I have the most knowledge. I'm not that person, but a lot of people reach out to me. So the more people that reach out to me, the more I look things up and the more knowledgeable I get.
That's the best. That's the best way to do it. And that's why I have this show every week, because it helps educate people. I can bring on fans of the channel and people that watch videos. All right, show your collection, share your knowledge with everyone and people that watch and interact and can have a discussion.
And the other thing, and I'm trying to get more of these. I didn't even show this, which probably should have showed this earlier. But
postcards and stuff.
I got this from Bob. He's a great wrestling collector. It's a CDV of Jack Johnson. It's very unique. The company that made this went out of business in 1897. So obviously, this the card itself with the back is from 1874. Obviously, not the original to Jack Johnson. However, the photo is from 1905. So I would probably put this at 1908 when he fought Tommy Burns, because the company had a studio literally blocks away from where the fight was. So if I had to guess, the guy that ran the studio probably ran a couple of these off with his machine, because CDV machines went out in 1905. So within 5 years of that, they were probably all broken and stuff like that. They weren't getting repaired. This was all information I got from a guy in England. He knew a lot more about this, because him and I started to get into a discussion about it, because I was telling him he was wrong. He told me the card was from 1874. And he goes, I know the picture isn't. He's like, but the card is. And I was like, you can't be right. And then he explained why he was right. And I looked it up and he was right. The card is from 1874. That's when this back of that company, and it's a beautiful card. You can't see it in this. It has gold around the edges. All the writing, and I know it's hard to see on this, it looks black. All the writing is in gold. If you put it up to a light in certain areas, it comes out gold, and the writing on the front is in gold. It's absolutely insane. It doesn't look altered in any way. So he said his best guess was what I was thinking. They did it in 1908 to honor the fight between him and Tommy Burns. But who knows?
I did get an update on that Jack Dempsey fight. So check this out. Supposedly they had an underground boxing match in Canada. Dempsey beat a very old Jack Johnson, and they both made a lot of money. The fight had to be in Canada because Johnson was wanted in the USA.
Ah, okay.
And then Orlando, I know you have your stack of Jack Johnsons. Maybe after a few of these, you can say any billiards cards.
So I was just about to show some. Is
that the one that you were posting in the Facebook, one of the Facebook groups recently, or is that?
Okay. Yeah, this is Maurice Vigneault. This is the same pose as in his Allen and Ginter's card. And then this is the same Maurice Vigneault. These both came up on eBay. Now this one just said well-dressed gentleman. And I looked at it and I was like, I know who that is. I was like, I'll take that. And then the other one, they knew who it was. They didn't know he was a billiard player. Besides there's a little lapel on there that has a billiard thing. And then I have cabinet cards of, like, that's George Sutton. Great story about him, and it's wrong on Wikipedia. There are two George Suttons of the time. One that had no hands because at birth his parents put him too close to a mill machine that took both his hands off. Obviously, this guy has a hand. One was a world champion billiards player. The other one was an exhibitionist. And everybody always asks why the T218 card has hands, because there was a guy with hands that was a world champion. Even in Wikipedia, it has it wrong. It has both their stories intertwined, which is hilarious. But there is two different
Wikipedia.
This is Fred Smith. He took second at a tournament in 1905. So this card's from 1905 Australia. Um, Billiards was huger than life in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. These guys were probably some of the biggest stars. This is George Slauson. This one's a little bit more common. You'll see it all over the place. Him and I think it's Jake Schaefer Sr. Because at the time there was a big world championship billiards match between them, and they made a bunch of these. I mean, I've seen probably about a dozen of them come up, but it's very rare and hard to come by when they do. One recently just went in auction, and fellow collector got it because he I think he wants to trade. He's going to get something of mine. But he contacted me. He goes, "Did you know this was going off tonight?" I was like, "No, I did not." So he won it. I mean, they're awesome cards to have. I do have actually other billiard cards. I don't want to like go too crazy, but there's a lot of like I showed you earlier. You're one of your favorite Jack Johnsons, the 590. They have billiard ones that are super hard to get. I have both of them. Another set I love.
Oh, the Felix Potens. I love that set.
To get a clean back on that is virtually impossible.
That is correct, especially with the two that I just picked up of Major Taylor, which I didn't really share it that much on YouTube yet, but that could be a whole discussion of Major Taylor.
I have there's I think one higher than this, and then there's only two higher than these, and I have two of the sixes. I think they're the same, but yeah, the same back.
So you got a question?
What's that?
Do you have any Doro cards, Cuban champion?
Which ones?
Doro, I think it's the
Alfredo de Oro.
There you go. Honest long cut too, and enough.
That's hard to get in that grade. I love this is one of my favorite sets, even though I sold it off this year. I kept the billiards ones. I have Alfredo de Oro, and I have the Willie Hoppy in it. Willie's probably one of my biggest PCs as far as billiards. It's hard to get so there's Walter Lindrum, who I have a bunch of his cards. He's in the 30s, 40s, 50s. There's not really any cards of Willie Mosconi. There is no real cards of Minnesota Fats. There are some 90s cards that just show them, but I'm not into modern cards of old people. I would rather them in the time frame. And then obviously Maurice Vigneault. Oh, here's another. So this is the 1926 Spalding champions, Walker Cochran. These cards in the 1926 are just hard to come by, and I've tried every time I try to get them, someone's already grabbed them before me. There is a Willie Hoppy out there of that set. If anybody has it, I would love to have it. I have him in an 8 in the Sporting Kings, and then I didn't pull them all out, but I have some of the. I sold most of these off this year too, but the Allen and Ginters billiard ones. But I probably have close to, and I'm going to start selling some of them off this year, but I probably have somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 billiard cards, lots of duplicates, and some that can't be graded. This is another one I showed on my Instagram page. This is a set from 1926, uses the same pictures as Lambert and Butler, except he wasn't in the Lambert and Butler one. It's called Lusos.
Is Bobby Jones in that set?
Yes, there is. There's
Really?
a Bobby Jones. There's a Walter Hagen. There's a Jack Dempsey, Gene Tooney. Super hard to come by. The only reason I knew, like, so I sent this to PSA years ago, and they told me they wouldn't grade it. So this before Facebook and all that, I started going online and emailing some people, and the guy that had the Dempsey's, there was like 4 or 5 different guys that had cards from the set. Right now, there's 2 on eBay that are cricket players, and I was thinking about going on and getting them.
What cricket players are in that set? I'm curious.
Yeah, so there's 75 cards known. Well, actually, there's only about 40 some known, but I think there's 75 total that are in the set. Only, I forget how many number. I think 75 numbered, but it's mostly actors and actresses. Very few sports stars, but there are some. More the ones that crossed over into movies like Dempsey and things like that.
I got to get that set name again and those links to the cricket ones. I'm curious who's on there.
Well, it's actually, I gotta look downstairs. It's out here. It is. Emprezzo Industrial de Tobaccos. It's from an island off of Morocco. It's a Moroccan set. Only Moroccan set I've ever known. So it's very, very hard to come by. I'm sure if you live close to there, there's a lot more of those cards. Another kind of cool thing I have, it kind of shows, and this is another set that goes between sports, but this shows that how they came. So this was the Godfrey Phillips. I think it's like either 29 to 36-ish range. But they came on the tobacco pack itself. Most of them were cut out. This is the only full one I've ever seen of this. I do have it cut in one of mine, but I kept it like this. One, because the actual card itself has indentations in it, so it really wouldn't matter. It's not going to grade well, but it's kind of cool to see how they originally came.
And then before I forget, let me go through some of these comments real quick. Supposedly they had a very underground match. They made a lot of money. The fight had to be in Canada. Dempsey made so much money fighting Johnson in Canada, was able to take less fights. And then, are there any tin types in existence?
I haven't seen any tin types. There are other cabinet cards, and I'm in the works of trying to get one. I don't have many. I lucked into the one I got, the CDV that I got. There is a collector that has a ton of Jack Johnson cabinet cards. I doubt I'll ever release it. I tried to get one. Again, I was a bridesmaid. Leland's had one from 1905, which would be considered as probably his rookie of rookies, and it was autographed. Went for $15,000. That was probably like 3 years ago. They had it. It was a beautiful cabinet card. It showed him in a top hat and everything. Insane.
And then we got a
comment. I wish I had more.
And then, is there a billiard card of Minnesota Fats?
The only one are modern day cards of him. His autograph is worth a lot because he didn't autograph much. He would tell you he would only autograph if you beat him. But I don't know how true that is, but his autographs go for a lot. He didn't have any cards that I know of from that time frame. The earliest one I would say is the BCA Hall of Fame cards in the 1980s. Had Mosconi and Fats and a couple other billiard players that you can't get in any other way. I'll give a shout out, and I don't have the billiards ones with me, but I brought the Jack Johnson one up because I use it as my background, and everybody asks me what it is. Funny thing about this too. So this is Helmar.
They do a good job with all the
They do,
parts as
yeah.
well.
So they have a billiard set. Now this was done in 2020. So obviously not old, but it looks kind of old. If you look on this, Helmar got confused because they put the Toledo Torpedo. Obviously, Jack Johnson's the Galveston Giant. There was another boxer called the Toledo Torpedo that was named Jack Johnson. And Jack Johnson Exhibition followed him because they had the same name and he thought it was really cool. The guy was a minor league baseball player, so he has some baseball cards out there.
Really?
But like they confused the two. Helmar does make the Jack Johnson baseball card of the minor league player, and it does say the Toledo Torpedo. But I just thought the card was cool. I have two of them, and I use the one as my background just because I thought it was cool. And I'm going to start using the billiard ones I have. The billiard ones does have Minnesota Fats and does have Louis Mosconi and Cicero Murphy and some of the great billiard players. That's why I liked it. And the stories on the back gave me a little bit more insight on some of the players that they have. So that was pretty cool. The
Awesome.
best billiard set is the Spalding because it has like 8 billiard players.
Did not know that. Now I do. Well, that was a really good episode. Where can people find you?
So TJM Collectibles on Facebook and Instagram. Trying to think. I did start something else. But yeah, mostly.
Did you start Twitter? Or was that?
I do have Twitter. So TMarch76 on Twitter. I haven't really changed it much over. But I do some things on there. But mostly through I show my collection off on Instagram. A lot of people confuse that as like trying to buy it. So I get a lot of those cards on there aren't for sale. I will put in my stories some of the cards I have for sale and have sold some through that way. Most of my for sale stuff I put on Facebook on my TJM Collectibles on there. And then on eBay, TMarch76 is my handle on there. But you'll see it goes under TJM Collectibles as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure the audience did as well. See you guys next Thursday, probably around 7:30ish as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.